This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello and welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. Joining us today is Steffi Diwan from our EBC Maldives Bureau. Hello, Steffi.
Hello, Alma. And I am Steffi Diwan, bringing you the news of the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. Myanmar's ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi faces fresh corruption charges from the ruling junta that her lawyer said Thursday were groundless, but could ensure she would never be able to return to politics.
A Filipino nurse in her late 40s has died from infections caused by the coronavirus, only days after receiving a dose of the Chinese Sinovac vaccine. Official says death not from adverse reaction.
Within last 3 months.
Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque advised those with mild COVID cases to go to isolation facilities instead of hospitals to reserve the COVID beds for patients with severe cases.
And Indonesia's forced withdrawal from badminton's All England Open Championship over coronavirus fears prompted a diplomatic appeal on Thursday as players were in shock and fans erupted online.
And we're still following the developments out of Myanmar. Ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi faces fresh corruption charges from the ruling junta that her lawyer said Thursday were groundless, but it could ensure she would never be able to return to politics. Military broadcaster Miwa Wari aired a video late on Wednesday of a Myanmar businessman saying that he gave Suu Kyi $550,000 over several years. Mang Wek said he had donated money to senior government figures for the good of his business. Take a look.
ကျွန်တော်ရဲ့စီမံဆောက်လုပ်ရေးကုမ္ပဏီကို2014ခုနှစ်မှာစတင်တည်ထောင်ခဲ့ပြီးယနေ့အချိန်ထိလုပ်ကိုင်ဆောင်ရွက်နေရှိပါတယ်။ဒီလိုလုပ်ကိုင်ဆောင်ရွက်နေစဉ်အတွင်းကျွန်တော်ရဲ့လုပ်ငန်းများအစဉ်ပြေရှုံးမှုစေရန်အတွက်သက်ဆိုင်ရာအစိုးရအဖွဲ့ဝင်များကိုငွေကြေးကူညီခြင်းလူဒန်းခြင်းများဆောင်ရွက်ခဲ့ပါတယ်။2019ခုနှစ်မှာကျွန်တော်ရဲ့ကုမ္ပဏီဝန်ထမ်းတို့ကမိတ်ဆက်ပြီးလို့နောင်ဆန်းစုကြည်နေအိမ်တွင်အလုပ်လုပ်ကိုင်ဆောင်ရွက်ပေးနေတဲ့ဒေါက်ခင်ခင်ဦးနဲ့ယဉ်ကျေးခဲ့ပါတယ်2018ခုနှစ်ဒီလကမှာဒေါက်ခင်ခင်ဦးရဲ့အကူအညီနဲ့နောင်ဆန်းစုကြည်ကိုတွေ့အိမ်မှာပါရောက်မလုပ်ခဲ့ပါတယ်အဲ့ဒီအချိန်မှာပဲဒေါက်ခင်ကြီးဖောင်ဒေးရှင်းအတွက်အမေရိကန်ဒေါ်လာအသိန်းကိုစက်ကူလက်ဆောင်အိမ်ငယ်တဲ့ထက်ပြီးနောင်ဆန်းစုကြည်ကိုကျွန်တော်ကိုယ်တိုင်ဦးကျော်ဆန်းနဲ့ဦးလာမျိုးမိသားစုရှင်းမှာပဲပြည့်ရခဲ့ပါတယ်2019ခုနှစ်မှာလည်းအဲ့ဒီအတိုင်းပါပဲအမေရိကန်ဒေါ်လာအသိန်းခွက်ကိုနောင်ဆန်းစုကြည်အိမ်မှာပဲကိုယ်တိုင်စက်ကူလက်ဆောင်အိမ်ငယ်တဲ့ထက်ပြီးနောင်ဆန်းစုကြည်ကိုပြည့်ရခဲ့ပါတယ်2020ခုနှစ်ဖေဖော်ဝါရီလမှာလည်းအရင်အတိုင်းပါပဲအမေရိကန်ဒေါ်လာ9000ကိုဝန်ဆန်းစုကြည်အိမ်မှာပဲဝန်ဆန်းစုကြည်ကိုတမန်ပြည့်ခဲ့ပါတယ်။အိမ်ပြည်သားမှာလည်းအမေရိကန်ဒေါ်လာနဲ့သိန်းခွဲကိုစက်ကူအိမ်နဲ့ထည့်ပြီးဝန်ဆန်းစုကြည်ကိုကိုယ်တိုင်သွားရောက်တွေ့ဆုံပြီးပြည့်ခဲ့ပါတယ်။အဲဒီလိုပြည့်တဲ့အချိန်တွေမှာအနားမှာဘယ်သူမှမရှိပါဘူး။
Suu Kyi already faces other corruption allegations. Last week, a junta spokesman said a now detained chief minister said he gave her $600,000 as well as more than 10 kilograms or 22 pounds of gold bars. Those accusations are groundless, Suu Kyi's lawyer Kin Bang Zhao told AFP. However, he said bribery conviction in a case against her personal character could see Suu Kyi prohibited from taking part in political activities. A state-run newspaper also reported Thursday a charity foundation named after Suu Kyi's mother is also under investigation for not paying enough fees on state-owned land that it uses. Soldiers and police terrorized several battle-scarred Yangon neighborhoods overnight Wednesday to Thursday as a mobile data blockade combined with an internet shutdown pushed scared residents further into an information blackout. Security forces threatened to shoot residents if they did not remove the barricades that demonstrators have built across the commercial capital as they battle authorities, according to a doctor from the South Okalapa Township. They also raided homes and arrested at least 10 people, he told AFP. In neighboring Thinganyu Township, one man said he had heard continuous gunfire for around 30 minutes before midnight and said he put cotton buds in the ears of his two sons so that they could fall asleep.
Alarmed at the strength of the opposition to the coup, the Myanmar junta is trying to instill fear with increasing violence, says Kin Zhao, the director of the Tampa-Dipa Institute, a Yangon-based think tank. I don't see any way where we can get to a peaceful, non-violent resolution.
What is most likely to happen is that it's going to end in perhaps a big bang, and a high number of casualties, and a lot of people taking up arms. Perhaps what they did in 1988, go into the jungle and enlist with the ethnic armed organizations, and the civil war goes on. So I don't see any way where we can get to a peaceful, non-violent resolution. In a way, it's a leaderless revolution. So who's going to negotiate with the military? No one's come up. We know that the revolution, the movement can go on its own momentum. But when you think about negotiations, it's almost impossible. And the military does not have any tendency or inclination or desire to negotiate. For them is going all out. In this way, it's more frightening than 1988.
Alarmed by the strength of the opposition to the coup, the Myanmar junta is trying to instill fear with increasing violence, according to Kin Zhao Min, the director of the Tampa-Dipa Institute, a think tank in Yangon, during an interview conducted online. Let's listen in.
And the military is alarmed at it, at the strength of the opposition. And so they are now trying to, number one, instill fear. All those ghastly wounds, fatal wounds, are to instill fear in people. And on Sunday, the number of the fatalities, the number of the casualties, their main strategy, they are not going to retreat, the military, they never do, and they're coming down very hard on the public, and they had made a miscalculation. They had underestimated the strength of the opposition to the coup. So China has a lot of assets to protect, fine, but at the same time, China could take a long-term view and try to resolve it without seemingly favoring the military too much. The military knows that China is the final lifeline for them. If there are sanctions come in, and especially if domestic public sentiment tends towards armed rebellion, what is most likely to happen is that it's going to end in perhaps a big bang, and a high number of casualties, and a lot of people taking up arms. perhaps what they did in 1988, go into the jungle and enlist with the ethnic armed organizations, and the civil war goes on. So I don't see any way where we can get to a peaceful, non-violent resolution. In a way, it's a leaderless revolution. So who's going to negotiate with the
Beijing says it was very concerned for the safety of its citizens in Myanmar on Monday after several Chinese factories were attacked amid a bloody crackdown on pro-democracy protests in Yangon. It urged Myanmar to take actions to resolutely avoid a recurrence of such incidents.
这次事件性质十分恶劣。事件发生后，中国驻缅甸使馆第一时间同缅甸中国企业商会和相关企业取得了联系，迅速要求当地警方采取有力措施，保障中资企业及人员安全。中方将继续敦促缅方采取切实措施，制止一切暴力行为，依法查处相关肇事者，确保在缅中资企业和人员的生命和财产安全。中方密切关注缅甸局势的发展，对中方机构和人员安全受到影响非常关切。中方希望缅方采取切实措施，保护在缅中国公民的安全，坚决避免类似事件再次发生。
State media said 32 factories in Myanmar's commercial heart of Yangon were attacked on Sunday, causing $37 million in damage and leaving 2 employees injured as security forces launched a bloody crackdown on protesters which left dozens dead. Many in Myanmar's pro-democracy movement believe China has sided with the army since February 1 coup took out the civilian government of Aung San Suu Kyi. China is a key investor in Myanmar and has bet big on its strategic importance to build its road initiative, a sweeping infrastructure project, a natural gas pipeline, a mega port of Rakhine State that give China access to the Indian Ocean. But a social media campaign by Myanmar's protest movement has urged citizens to rally against the Chinese pipeline which crosses the country. A widespread popular campaign against Chinese interests in the country is likely to rattle Beijing. The Myanmar public has pushed back at Chinese investments before with lingering suspicions over its aim and the conditions under which it employs local workers in Chinese factories. China has called for a de-escalation of the situation in Myanmar, which has left more than 100 protesters dead in several weeks of unrest.
In a related news, Taiwan advised its companies in Myanmar to fly the island's flag to distinguish themselves from Chinese businesses, which came under attack over the weekend amid a bloody crackdown on pro-democracy protests in Yangon. Several Chinese-owned factories were torched in a textile-producing district of Yangon on Sunday when Myanmar saw its deadliest day of protests against the military since the February 1 putsch. The attack on the Chinese factories has rattled Taiwan, whose businesses have previously been mistakenly targeted during bouts of anti-Chinese sentiment in Southeast Asia. Taiwan's de facto embassy in Myanmar advised companies to label themselves as Taiwanese business in Myanmar language, to fly our national flag, and explain to local employees and nearby residents that they're Taiwanese factories to avoid confusions and misjudgment. Public anger towards China has soared in Myanmar as many in the pro-democracy movement believe China has sided with the army. China initially pushed back against international outcry over the coup, calling it interference in the country's internal affairs, though more recently it agreed to a United Nations Security Council resolution which strongly condemns the use of violence against peaceful protesters. Taiwan, a self-ruled democratic island, vocally condemned the coup from early on, as well as the junta's successive abuse of lethal force against peaceful protesters.
Cherokee County's Sheriff Frank Reynolds says during a press conference that the suspect in the series of shootings in the Atlanta area that left 6 women dead has potentially sexual addiction, and that the killings may not be racially motivated. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms declared that it is very likely that there would have been more victims on yesterday had the suspect not been apprehended.
Again,
he made indicators that he has some issues, potentially sexual addiction, and may have frequented some of these places in the past. It's still early, but the indicators right now are it may not be. It may be targets of opportunity. Again, we believe that he frequented these places in the past and may have been lashing out.
He claims that these, and as the chief said, this is still early, but he does claim that it was not racially motivated.
that they determined that the suspect was on his way to Florida, I believe, and perhaps to carry out additional shootings. So again, it really speaks to the coordination and the quick response from law enforcement. For as tragic as this was on yesterday in Metro Atlanta, this could have been significantly worse.
The murders raised fears among Asian Americans. The violence comes at a time of extreme tension for the American community. The number of attacks and hate crimes against Asian Americans has exploded since the beginning of the pandemic. According to anti-extremism groups, activists laid some of the blame for the increase of the feed of the former President Donald Trump, who repeatedly referred to the coronavirus as the China virus.
Anti-crime issues in New York is not that widespread. However, people feel unsafe. They worry. A lot of people don't even want to go to the subways, ride the subways.
我觉得就是对这次亚特兰大枪击案的遇难者的不幸感到非常的悲伤。那我觉得不管是谁，如果这样无辜付出生命的话，都是非常可惜的。所以希望以后不会有这样的事件再次发生。
This is a time for mourning and grief for many, many people in the Asian American community, for my wife Evelyn and me. But it's also a time for action. We have to call on our leaders to do more. Here in New York City, I've called for the full funding of the Asian Hate Crimes Task Force. This is not something that volunteers can be asked to address. If we recognize the gravity of this set of problems, we have to invest. We should be treating hate crimes as such. And make no mistake, these women were targeted on the basis of their race. It's also true of the woman in Flushing, of the man on the subway, of the restaurant worker. They're all targeted because of their race. We all know this, and we have to start acting like it, as a government, as a people.
But I do want to say to our Asian American community that we stand with you and understand how this has frightened and shocked and outraged. But knowing the increasing level of hate crime against our Asian American brothers and sisters, we also want to speak out in solidarity with them.
Whatever the motivation here, I know that Asian Americans are very concerned because, as you know, I've been speaking about the brutality against Asian Americans for the last couple months, and I think it is very, very troublesome.
21-year-old man identified as Robert Etron Long was apprehended about 150 miles or 240 kilometers south of Atlanta several hours after the shootings. When he was caught, Long was on his way to Florida, perhaps to carry out more shootings targeting some type of porn industry. It was Long's parents who contacted police after his photo was released Tuesday, announcing he was a suspect, and they helped identify him. Authorities have charged Long with 4 counts of murder and 1 count of aggravated assault in the first of the 3 shootings, which took place in a suburb north of Atlanta, U.S. media reported. Additionally, Atlanta police said that they have charged frequent attacks at 2 spots in the city. A former classmate said Long's father was a youth pastor and Long was big in religion. Long was deeply involved in probable First Baptist Church, which he attended with his parents and younger sister, according to the news website Heavy.
A Filipino nurse in her late 40s has died from infections caused by COVID-19 only days after receiving the Sinovac vaccine. Now, health officials clarified once more that the cause of the nurse's death was COVID-19 and not because of the vaccine. They added that before the said healthcare worker was vaccinated, he had a comorbidity that may have caused him to have COVID-19 despite the vaccination.
Yung pong dahilan ng pagkakasawi po niya ay dahil sa infeksyon ng coronavirus. Siya po ay nagkaroon ng infection, nag-full-blown po siya, nagkaroon po ng, naapektuhan po ang kanyang baga, nagkaroon po siya ng pneumonia, kanya po nagtuloy-tuloy at nag-deteriorate po yung kanyang kondisyon. Totally, alam po natin na lahat po kasi ng mga binabakunaan, nagkakaroon po ng health declaration. Yung pong health declaration na yun ay ginagawa po natin para mapangalagaan ang kalusugan po ng mga each and every one na magpapabakuna. At that health declaration form po, nakita po natin ang declaration lang niya ay meron siyang comorbidities, may diabetes, meron po siyang hypertension na control, at the same time meron po siyang bronchial asthma na control din po, naka-maintenance siya. Tinatanong din po doon kung meron po kayong symptoms ng COVID o kayo po ay nagkaroon ng COVID for the within last 3 months po. Kasi po, para mapangalagaan nga po natin ang kanilang kalusugan, lahat po doon sa pagtatanong na yun, wala pong mga bagay na magsasabi po o signal na safety signal po na sasabihin na hindi po siya dapat bakunaan. Kanya po siya ay nabakunaan. Kanya lang po, after a day, nagkaroon po siya ng non-productive cough na ina-attribute po niya parang allergy. Tapos nagkalagnat siya. Nagkaroon din po ng rashes the following days. Tapos bigla po siyang gumrabe po yung symptoms niya. Nag-consult sa emergency room. Ina-advise mo mapa-admit. Hindi pa rin po siya nagpa-admit. Sabi niya mag-go-home quarantine kasi yung symptoms po niya nagpo-point na sa COVID. Kanya lang po nung after 3 days na in-advise siya na umuwi po siya, bumalik siya, nagpa-admit na, medyo na po, mas lumala po ng konti yung symptoms. Tapos nagpa-swab, doon po natin nalaman na mayroon po siyang RT-PCR na COVID-19 positive po siya. Tapos tin-treat po siya accordingly, kanya lang po, syempre, hindi na po nahabol yung situation. Yun po yung mga investigasyon na nakita namin. At nandoon din po yung totoo po na bakunaan siya, pero hindi naman po yun, wala po yung kinalaman sa kanyang pagkakasawi o paglala ng kanyang kondisyon.
Masasabi ba ho natin na yung bakuna niya came too late? Kasi apparently nabakunahan siya, meron na siyang COVID-19.
Dahil po kasi, ngayon po kasi meron tayong upsurge ng incidence po ng COVID-19. No? Hindi po natin kasi masasabi kung sino yung makakahawa sa atin. Hindi rin po naman natin masasabi na it came too late kasi po, pagka po binakunaan tayo, usually it will take po mga 3 weeks before we develop a primary immune response para po magkakaroon tayo ng protection. Pero hindi pa po sapat yun. Kanya nga po tayo ay nagkakaroon ng second dose para mag-boost po nung una nating respond dun sa yung protection. Pagkatapos po nun, habang tumatagal, tumataas po yung ating protection, siyempre po magwe-wane yun, pero meron po tayong nagagawang parang memory tung sa binakuna sa atin. Para on second exposure, para doon sa true virus, mas maganda po yung ating protection. Meron tayong mas magandang panlaban. Ngayon, hindi ko po masasabi kung it was too late. Baka po kasi at that time, na wala siyang sintomas, nag-i-incubate na rin po siya. Dahil siyempre po, alam niyo po, health worker to, na-expose po kayo sa ospital. Hindi niyo rin po alam kung sino po yung mga meron o wala na nakakahalubilo niyo. Kanya po tayo, ini-encourage natin, kahit na nga po nabakunaan tayo, we have to practice all yung pong hand hygiene, wearing of the face mask, the face shield, and socially distance po. It is always prudent to do that, even if we be vaccinated fully po.
Meanwhile, Presidential Spokesperson Secretary Harry Roque advised those with mild COVID-19 cases to go to isolation facilities instead of hospitals to reserve COVID-19 beds for patients with severe cases. Dr. Edsel Salvana of the University of the Philippines explains.
Then we've had very sick patients, including doctors in the ICU. So I think that from a completely medical standpoint, we're in a better position. Mas marami po tayong gamot. We have dexamethasone, we have remdesivir, we have tocilizumab as well. We also have right now, like with USEC Vega, we have this one hospital command which is really coordinating. Kasi yung problema talaga natin right now is we need to make sure that patients who need to be in the hospital do have hospital beds. The truth is, if these are all mild cases, it's not going to, hindi naman tataas yung death rates natin. Ang problem is, about 50% of the mild cases are also admitted in the hospitals, which pushes out some of the beds that can be used for severe. And so, yung pag-utilize po natin ng ating mga TTMFs for the mild cases, dapat mas gawin natin yon para we can reserve the hospital beds for the severe cases. Because the severe cases, yun yung mamamatay if we don't have hospital beds for them. And like I said, we already know how to take care of severe COVID. So two-prong po yung approach. We really need to decrease the number of cases that we have right now, and we already know what works. We have face masks, we have face shield, we have enhanced contact tracing. And the second thing is we need to make sure that for those who do develop severe disease, that we continue to have hospital beds open for them because we can take good care of them, and mas mababa na po yung mortality compared to last year na left and right po talaga namamatay because we didn't really know what we were doing po.
Well, siguro, based on personal experience, dito sa aking isolation facility, meron pong mga doktor at mga nurses na 2 beses sa isang araw sila nagra-rounds. No? Isang 9 in the morning, isang 4 in the afternoon. So kung kayo po ay mild ng symptoms or asymptomatic, ako nga po asymptomatic, dapat siguro ibigay ko na yung espasyo ko dito sa iba, no? At maghanda na lang ako ng sarili kwarto ko sa bahay ko na hiwalay sa aking misis. No? Pero hindi po ibig sabihin na palibasa isolation facility kayo pupunta, wala pong doktor. Meron po mga doktor, may mga nurses po dito sa hotel where I'm staying right now. 2 beses po ang rounds nila at 2 beses kayo kinukuhanan din ng vital statistics kasama na po yung oximeter to measure your oxygen level. So, alam ko po, nakakagulat pag kayo nag-test positive at lalo na pag meron na kayong mga mild symptoms, no? Pero hindi po dapat takbo ka agad sa ospital. Kung talagang nakakahinga naman kayo at kayo po ay parang meron lamang sipon, dito na po kayo sa mga isolation centers pumunta dahil meron din po mga doktor dito na mag-aalaga sa inyo.
Foreigners and restrict the number of Filipinos entering the country as authorities battle to contain a spike in coronavirus infections. The temporary measures come after the number of daily cases hit a 7-month high. of more than 5,000 on Monday, and experts predict the figure could double by the end of March. Most of the active infections are in Metro Manila, where targeted lockdowns, nighttime curfews, and a stay-at-home order for all children are being used to curb the spread. The ban on overseas arrivals was announced late Tuesday by the government's COVID-19 task force and takes effect March 20. Overseas Filipino workers will be exempt, but the number of passenger arrivals will be limited to 1,500 a day. More than 1 million doses of vaccines developed by Sinovac and the British-Swedish drug maker AstraZeneca have already been delivered in the past 2 weeks, and the government hopes to have a stable supply of vaccines starting April or May, according to retired General Carlito Galvez, who is overseeing the effort. Authorities aim to inoculate 1.7 million medical staff by mid-April before distributing vaccines to the elderly and the poor.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken meets his South Korean counterpart Chung Yoo-young in Seoul on a trip alongside Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to Japan and South Korea, aimed at reiterating their alliances and presenting a united front against an increasingly assertive China and the nuclear-armed North Korea. In his opening statement, Blinken voices concern over dangerous erosion of democracy in the region, pointing to Myanmar, China, and North Korea.
China is using coercion and aggression to systematically erode autonomy in Hong Kong, undercut democracy in Taiwan, abuse human rights in Xinjiang and Tibet, and assert maritime claims in the South China Sea that violate international law. In Burma, the military is attempting to overturn the results of a democratic election, brutally repressing peaceful protesters, gunning down youth who were simply demanding a say in their country's future.
And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. Steffi and I will be back after this short break.
It says the best defense is still containment.
We are in uncharted territory.
Final volume 450. FI on to 100%. Traffic back. Construction.
North Korea severed diplomatic ties with Malaysia on Friday after a court there ruled that a North Korean man could be extradited to the United States to face money laundering charges. Pyongyang's foreign ministry said it was responding to Malaysia's extradition of a North Korean citizen to the U.S. earlier this month, a move it labeled an unpardonable crime carried out under blind obedience to U.S. pressure. On March 9, a North Korean man named Moon Chol-myong lost his final appeal in Malaysia's top court against extradition to the U.S. to face money laundering charges. He had denied claims of leading a criminal group that violated sanctions by supplying prohibited items to the North and laundered funds through front companies, according to his lawyers. Moon, in his 50s, faces 4 charges of money laundering and 2 of conspiracy to launder money. The allegations relate mainly to his work in Singapore. There have been cases of businesses in Singapore sending luxury items such as liquor and watches to North Korea, which is banned under sanctions imposed on Pyongyang over its weapons programs. Malaysia had been one of the nuclear-armed countries' few allies until the North Korean leader's relative, Kim Jong-nam, was murdered with a banned nerve agent as he waited to catch a flight from Kuala Lumpur. Ties plunged after the Cold War-style hit, but had started to get back on track with Malaysia announcing the reopening of its Pyongyang embassy. But Friday's surprise move put a swift end to that.
The Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, is working to secure the safe release of 4 Filipino seafarers who were abducted by pirates in the Gulf of Guinea. Families have been informed and efforts are underway to secure the crew members' safe release, the DFA said in a statement on Thursday. A maritime executive report said 15 crew members of MV David B, a Maltese-flagged chemical tanker, were kidnapped by 9 armed intruders after boarding the vessel while in the Gulf of Guinea. Initial reports said the vessel had 21 crew aboard, which includes Romanians and Filipinos. The chemical tanker's chief manager, the Polish Ship Management, confirmed that the 15 seafarers are all together and doing well under the difficult circumstances after establishing communication on March 17.
Okay, back to the pandemic situation. The head of the European Medicines Agency says she wants to raise awareness among those who have been or intend to be vaccinated with AstraZeneca's vaccine in case of any side effects. The chair of the EMA Pharmacovigilance Committee says research has found the vaccine causes no increase in overall risk of blood clots and labels such events as rare.
About 7 million people have now been vaccinated in the EU with the AstraZeneca vaccine, and 11 million have been vaccinated in the UK, and there is increasing use of this vaccine in other countries. It remains very important that all side effects are closely monitored and reported so that we can evaluate them and see if there's any need to update the information and warnings about possible risks. When you vaccinate millions of people, it's inevitable that rare or serious incidences or illnesses will occur in the time immediately following vaccination. Our role in the EU regulatory system is to rapidly detect these incidents and investigate whether there may be a link to the vaccine or whether they are the result of illnesses which occur by chance close in time to the vaccination. One of the reasons that we are highlighting the conclusions from the safety discussions today is so that we raise awareness among people who have been vaccinated or intend to be vaccinated about things that they should look out for just in case they have any problem. If it was me, I would be vaccinated tomorrow. But I would want to know that if anything happened to me after vaccination, what I should do about it. And that's what we're saying today.
PROC noted that the number of thromboembolic events reported after vaccination is lower than the expected in the general population. And PROC has concluded that there is no increase in the overall risk of blood clots with this vaccine. PROC also concluded that it's very important that these events are rare. As of last night, 7 cases of this disseminated intravascular coagulation and 18 cases of cerebral venous sinus thrombosis were reported out of almost 20 million vaccinated people.
The EMA said, however, that further investigation was needed into a number of rare cases linked to the AstraZeneca jab that involved low levels of blood platelets, cells that help clotting. It was particularly looking at cases of cerebral venous thrombosis, or blood clots in the vessels draining blood from the brain. The EMA had recommended adding a warning to product information with the AstraZeneca shot.
After becoming the first country outside of Europe to temporarily delay the AstraZeneca vaccine, Thailand lifts its suspension and Premier Prayut Chan-o-cha receives the first shot.
วัคซีนเราจะฉีดเข้ากระเป็นเชิญท่านรองนายกฉีดกับท่านนายกในวันนี้เป็นวัคซีน AstraZeneca นะครับ
The country became the first outside of Europe to temporarily delay the COVID-19 vaccine after several EU nations, including Ireland, the Netherlands, and Denmark, moved to delay it due to reports that some recipients had suffered blood clots. Thailand is already administering China's Sinovac vaccine with millions more imported doses expected in the coming months. But it was expected to add the Oxford AstraZeneca injection to its vaccine option on Friday, before health authorities abruptly suspended it as a precaution. By Monday, it had cleared its use after the World Health Organization, the European Medicines Agency, and many countries, including Britain and Canada, declared it safe for use. The Thailand is not set to start its own mass vaccination campaign until June, with more than 60 million shots planned through domestic production of the AstraZeneca vaccine. But it is vaccinating essential workers and other groups with more than 100,000 AstraZeneca jobs imported from emergency use earlier this month. Indonesia delayed its AstraZeneca rollout on Monday, and Venezuela announced it that would authorize the job over fears of complications.
And finally, in our news, you might be familiar with snoring. Of course, we all are. But did you know that it could lead to a temporary stop of breathing during sleep? Watch as our EBC correspondents in Bangkok, Nicole and Aaron, who is also a registered polysomnographic technologist, discuss everything you need to know about obstructive sleep apnea syndrome. Take a look.
Sources, obstructive sleep apnea syndrome is the most common sleep-related breathing disorder worldwide. Meanwhile, in Asia, the prevalence of symptomatic OSA in middle-aged men and women is 4.1 to 7.5% and 2.1 to 3.2% respectively, according to a research published in PubMed.org. Today, we will understand more of this through a registered sleep technologist and fellow EBC correspondent based here in Thailand.
Hi, I'm Aaron Blue Calleja, a registered polysomnographic technologist with 8 years experience from the Philippines and now here in Thailand.
So Aaron, we would like to know what are the causes of this obstructive sleep apnea or OSA, and is this paghihilik in Filipino?
Okay, so thank you for that question. So let me clarify first. Paghihilik is just only one of the signs and symptoms of sleep apnea. Okay, but if you are snoring or if you snore during your sleep, possible there is a chances are you have obstructive sleep apnea. But some patients, even though they snore, they don't have obstructive sleep apnea. Obstructive sleep apnea, from the name itself, obstructive, meaning there is an obstruction to your airway while you are sleeping, and that obstruction can lead to stop of breathing, which is apnea. Apnea is the absence of breathing during sleep. And there are many causes why we have obstructive sleep apnea. So number one of which is the drugs we take. Maybe you are taking like sleeping pills or sedative before you sleep. It will cause obstructive sleep apnea because it relaxes our muscle, therefore relaxes the passage of airway. Number two is increase in age. So while we increase in age, our muscle weakens. So mostly of like 30, 40, 50 years old above, particularly male, is prone to obstructive sleep apnea. Okay, based on this statistic, men have the higher risk of obstructive sleep apnea rather than female. But after menopausal years, female is prone to obstructive sleep apnea. Okay, next also is the increase in BMI. While we gain weight, particularly we have fatty deposits around the neck, we are prone to obstructive sleep apnea because that fat blocks the airway while we are sleeping. We also have craniofacial abnormalities. So, on my experience on the practice of sleep medicine, it's not always the big ones or the patient who is fat are prone to obstructive sleep apnea. I have patient who is thin but have obstructive sleep apnea because of the craniofacial abnormalities. So some patients have small chin when they sleep on supine, so it moves backward. That causes obstruction to the airway. Okay, particularly we Asians experience that. Okay, increased nasal resistance may be also anatomical abnormalities on the passage of air through your nose. And if you have large tonsils and large adenoids, particularly on children, so the large tonsils and adenoids can block the airway. Also, we have the macroglossia, which is the enlarged tongue. So that's some of the causes of obstructive sleep apnea.
Okay, so now that you have discussed the causes, we would like to know the effects of this sleeping disorder.
So there are many effects of this obstructive sleep apnea in our body system. So let's do it one by one. So for cardiology or for the heart, so the patient may manifest hypertension if not addressed correctly. So we will also have left ventricular hypertrophy, or the left side of the heart is being enlarged. We will also prone to arrhythmias, or that is the abnormal heart rhythm of the patient. So there's also heart failure if we don't address obstructive sleep apnea or we ignore sleep apnea for the long term. For the psychiatry, you can see the patients, mostly obstructive sleep apnea patients have depression, have an anxiety, have behavioral problems. So example, you don't have enough sleep. It's normal for us to be irritated, right, in the morning while we are working, while we are going to school, because you don't have enough sleep. Okay, and also some patients have acute delirium, can manifest acute delirium. Okay, from the neurology, one of the bad effects of sleep disorder, obstructive sleep apnea, is stroke. So patient may experience stroke if not address sleep apnea correctly. Okay, for the anesthesiology, some doctors, they prescribe sleep test before an operation to avoid difficulty in intubation, because we know that when we put anesthesia to the patient, it relaxes the whole body system. Okay, it also relaxes the airway. Some instances, like if the patient manifests like decrease in oxygen, the doctor and the operating staff have difficulty intubating the patient. That's why some doctors check first if the patient is having obstructive apnea. Okay, next, for the urology or the urinary system, patient may manifest nocturia or frequent urinating at night. So it also affects the quality of your sleep, because usually when we sleep, there should be no interference. But when we have obstructive sleep apnea, some patient wants to go to the toilet in between their sleep. So the quality of sleep is not okay. And also it produces, or it can result to impotence. Okay, and also erectile dysfunction for the male. Okay, for the endocrinology or endocrine system, we can see some patients develop diabetes when they have obstructive sleep apnea. Okay, and for the ENT, mainly snoring is one of the great factor for having sleep apnea. So when the patient also wakes up, they feel that the mouth is dry, they are prone to sore throat also, and hoarseness of voice. Okay, for the gastroenterology, patient can be prone to GERD, or what we call gastroesophageal reflux. Okay, and for the blood, patient can manifest polycythemia. It is the mechanism of the body to increase the production of RBC in our body, because when you have obstructive sleep apnea, your oxygenation in your body gets low because of the obstruction. So that's why our body compensates by producing more. Okay, for the pulmonology, so for the lungs, patient can manifest nocturnal shortness of breath. So they are having difficulty breathing at night, particularly when they are sleeping, and also respiratory failure.
This is getting really interesting, and your job is very unique. Okay?
Thank you.
So probably they are thinking that OSA is just normal when you are tired, okay? But as you have mentioned, it could be serious, and we should not shrug it off.
Yes.
Now that our patient is sleeping, can you show us how did you diagnose our patient?
Okay, so before I show you how I diagnose the patient, so I will again reiterate that paghihilik is not normal. Okay, we are thinking the patient have a deep sleep, but that is not true. Okay, so I will correct the belief that paghihilik is equals to deep sleep. Okay, now I will show you my patient. So before we hook the patient to the sensors, we put this patient to the system, and now we are the test or the sleep test is running right now. So as you can see, so this is our patient. So now he is sleeping in supine, and I said that supine position is the worst position when you're having obstructive sleep apnea, because when you are in supine or you are flat on bed, tendencies are your muscles here, particularly also your tongue, move backward, so it blocks the airway. So as you can see, the patient is now on N2. Okay, so for you to appreciate, our sleep have stages. We have the N1, N2, and N3. So for the N1, that is the non-REM sleep. So non-rapid eye movement. There's no movement of the eye while we're sleeping. So NREM sleep is the light sleep. Okay? So when you are feeling sleepy, you're entering the stage of N1. Okay? So after the N1, we go to N2. So N2 is the true sleep. Okay? And going to N3, N3 is the deep sleep. So that's the deepest sleep we had. Then after the deep sleep, we will go now to REM, or the dream stage. So overall, we have the N1, N2, N3, and REM, the dream stage. Okay? Then also, we add the wake stage when the patient is awake. Okay, as you can see, the patient now is on N2 based on the waves he manifested. Okay, the EKG is normal. Yes, we can also monitor the heart rate, because usually some patient with sleep apnea manifested abnormal heart rhythms, what I said earlier, right? Then also we will check for the snoring. The patient snore. So there is a movement of snoring. So for this patient, he had mild to moderate snoring. Okay. So I therefore conclude this patient have obstructive sleep apnea. Then later, we will do the treatment of this patient by the use of the CPAP. CPAP is continuous positive airway pressure. That is the treatment of choice for OSA patient.
Okay, well, thank you. And how many minutes or hours should we wait so that we could fully, or we could get full information about the patients?
Usually, we do the sleep test for the full night sleep test. That is like 7 to 8 hours, like the normal sleep of the patient. So we ask the patient to do what he is doing normally when he is sleeping, or when he wants to sleep. For example, if the patient wants to read books before sleeping, want to watch TV, want to take shower, he can do it naturally when you are in the sleep lab. Then, if you have the doctor's prescription about sleep test, or when we say split night sleep test, meaning you need to have the diagnostic, and the other part you need to have the treatment. So for the diagnostic, that is 2 hours, and for the treatment, that is 4 hours. The treatment is the time we use the CPAP to the patient. And using the CPAP to the patient, we are now getting the optimal pressure the pressure of the machine that helps the patient to remove or to treat obstructive apnea, to have like normal oxygenation during the sleep. There's no obstruction, there's no apnea, there's no hypopnea in the patient, and also there's no snoring.
Lastly, RN, for our viewers, we all know that each patient is different from each other. But what can you advise or recommend to us right now to treat, or more importantly, to prevent this OSA?
Okay, so particularly we are focusing now on obstructive sleep apnea. So one treatment can be like lessen your body weight. So you need to have a proper diet and exercise. So your BMI should be a normal range. And also, you can sleep not on supine, but sleep either left or either right to avoid your tongue moving backward and obstruct your airway. If you are sleeping, avoid using your gadget 1 to 2 hours. Okay, don't use cell phone, don't play on cell phone, don't use your tablet, don't watch TV before you sleep 1 to 2 hours. Because the blue light of that tells our brain, okay, you should wake up. That's why when you are playing with your mobile phone, it does not help you feel sleepy. If you are smoking, avoid smoking or stop smoking. If you are drinking, like alcoholic drinks, so avoid drinking alcoholic drinks, particularly when you are ready to sleep. Because sometimes the patient or the people say that alcohol can help them sleep. But in fact, when you drink alcohol, you have like abnormal waves during your sleep. So it can affect also the quality of your sleep. And also, if you have manifestation of sleep disorder, particularly obstructive sleep apnea, ask the doctor as soon as possible to avoid any further complications in your body system.
Thank you, RN, for sharing your expertise to us. And yes, you are right. We are going to have more discussion about sleep on our next episodes. From Bangkok, Thailand, this is Crystal Nicole Di Marucot
and Aaron Lucalieja, and we live in interesting times.
Thank you, guys. And by the way, Steffi, we are celebrating World Sleep Day today. So we better sleep well tonight.
So,
and thank you. Yes.
Before I go, I would like, on behalf of EBC Bureau, I would like to greet Miss Weng de la Fuente, our president. Advance happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Hey, President Weng. And I would like also to thank our EBC correspondents there in Bangkok, Thailand for that feature. To Aaron Blue Calleja, who is a registered polysomnographic technologist, and also as well as our correspondent. And of course, Cristel Di Marucot. Thank you very much. Thank you, Steffi, for joining me today. Have a great weekend.
Thank you so much, Alma, for having me today. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here in ASEAN in Focus. This is Steffi Di Juan, your EBC Maldives Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
I'm Alma Angeles. We'll see you back next week. We live in interesting times.